Hello, in this video we're going to talk about car leases. And this is a little bit different than buying a car. So I want to kind of go through the details of it and kind of let you know a little bit about the advantages of not doing a lease, okay? There are not, it's very disadvantageous to do a lease. You don't want to do it, you want to avoid it at all costs. So we're going to go through the details on why that is, okay? That doesn't mean that if your friends or your parents or your family did leases that they're just unintelligent or they don't know what they're doing, but let me tell you, just learn from others. Do not do a lease. Do not do a lease. Mathematically, it does not work for you. Okay, so let's go into some details here. First thing, we got the vocab word. It is essentially a glorified car rental. You are renting this car, but instead of renting it for like a day or 2 days, maybe when you're on vacation, you are renting this car for years. A typical lease is like a 3-year lease. So you're going to be renting this car for 3 years. That is a long-term rental. Okay, not a good thing. Okay, let's talk about it. They do offer lower monthly payments or lower down payment. This is how they entice you to get in to get a lease. And then at the end of the lease, when the lease is up, you've rented the car. You don't own the car, so you can't take and sell it like you can if you owned the car. You'd still have an asset there. That is not the case with a lease. You do not own it at all, okay? All right. So here are some disadvantages of a car lease. Okay, number one, a lease is only available when the car is brand new. And we've talked before about why it's really disadvantageous to buy a new car. You needed to wait till the car is about 3 years old, okay? Because all of that depreciation, that 50% of the value of the car hits you in the first 3 years. Well, guess what? Leases are for typically the first 3 years of the car. So essentially what you're doing is you're renting the car for the exact amount that it is depreciating over those first 3 years. That's the problem with a lease. If you could do a lease for a car maybe that's 7 years old to 10 years old and do a 3-year lease on that, it probably wouldn't be that bad of a thing. But the problem with the lease is that it requires that you purchase a brand new car. Now, there's very, very rare scenarios like, oh, this is almost new car. It's only a year old. Still, you don't want to be buying cars that are within the first 3 years of them being made. They just eat too much in depreciation. So, early termination. If you decide that you want out of this lease, let's say it's a 3-year lease and 18 months into it, you just hate the car. Or maybe your family has changed, right? Maybe you have 2 more children now than when you purchased the car. Maybe you had twins or something and you need more room. You can terminate a lease, but it's going to cost you. There is an early termination fee associated with it, not a good thing. If you exceed your mileage, every mile, let's say, and usually they give you, okay, it's a 3-year lease, they'll give you anywhere from 30 to 36,000 miles. That's only 12,000 miles a year. I don't know about you, but 12,000 miles a year just isn't enough. In my cars that I own, we usually run about 25,000 miles a year. So about double that. Well, on a lease, every mile that you go over that lease, that allotment, is 15 to 20 cents per mile. You're thinking, well, 15 to 20 cents, that's not a big deal. But when you start getting thousands and thousands of miles, that's going to cost you a lot of money. So really just not a good thing there. And then finally, wear and tear on the vehicle. Now, a normal car that's 3 years old should kind of look like this, right? Should have this amount of wear and tear. If your car, after you've leased it for 3 years and you turn it back in, if they deem that your car has had excessive wear and tear, more than what they consider normal, you're going to pay for that. So you're paying all across the board for all of these. Just not worth it. It's not to your advantage to do it. Let's look at an example here and let's talk about some math here. You know, I'm a math teacher, I love numbers. Let's kind of look at some numbers here. First lease, first 3 years is $15,000, right? Every month you're making monthly payments. At the end of 3 years, you own nothing, but you got to drive it for 3 years for $15,000. Well, if you would have purchased that car, that same car that you spent $15,000 on the lease would cost $34,000 brand new. Now, again, I'm still not a proponent of purchasing new cars, but we're just going through this scenario. Well, $15,000 is a lot cheaper than $34,000. Well, sure, but that's only 3 years. The average person keeps their car about 5 to 6 years. So let's just say 6, just to make it easy. So you get your lease, you do it for the first 3 years, you turn in your lease. Let's say that you don't owe anything in mileage. Not going to happen. You don't owe anything in wear and tear. That's going to be difficult. Okay, so you get into another one. You lease it again, the exact same payments. Now, typically the payments will go up because cars cost more. just normal inflation. Okay, well, at this, after 6 years, you've only spent $30,000, right? $31,000. It's still cheaper than the $34,000 car. Well, on the face value, yes, it is. But the difference is at the end of 6 years, with the car, you own the car. And that $30,000 car at the end of 6 years is probably worth somewhere around $10,000, right? You lose quite a bit of value there. It's probably worth maybe 25 to 30% of its original value. So at least you have that you can take that $10,000 and use it to buy a newer car. Okay, again, the longer you can keep a car and the older a car is, the less depreciation that you'll have and the less money it will cost you, thus freeing up extra money so you can invest. But yeah, this lease, even with that, I mean, the lease, you lose $6,500. Well, why do people want a lease then? Why do so many people do a lease? Usually it's because the payments are lower. You can buy a brand new car and the payments are lower. Because all that you're essentially paying for is the depreciation. You're not paying on any principal whatsoever because you don't own the car. You are just renting it. So yeah, leases, very, very bad news all around. I'm bringing this back up. I've showed this to you before. This is the depreciation of a vehicle. Okay, remember the first 3 years here we go. First 3 years are somewhere right around here. Okay, and that's roughly 50%. Of the car's value that you're losing. And when you get a lease, all they're doing is they're making you pay the depreciation for that time that you've owned it. And you are paying the depreciation on the most expensive time of the life of that car. So that's why leases are really, really bad. I would avoid them. I would avoid all leases. I've never seen a lease where it's been to your advantage to do it. Dave Ramsey, I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan. Dave Ramsey refers to them as fleeces. They are just fleecing you out of your money. So anyway, leases are bad. Avoid them with everything that you can. Remember, purchase a car. You're going to pay cash for the purchase price, not to exceed half of your annual income for the value of the car.